SaaS founder, retail tech provider for store tech. Yes, our guest today has probably seen your pitch deck. And every single time she's seen you insulting the store on slide 2.
Yeah, that's Kit Campoy. 25 years running stores, author of the Retail Leaders Field Guide, and today she's going to tell us what corporate keeps getting wrong about the store floor.
The decisions that quietly break in stores, the trade-offs managers are making that nobody at HQ sees, and what 80% turnover actually feels like from the inside.
Yeah, if you build for retail, lead in retail, even if you're just selling into retail, or you just work in retail stores and you wish everyone would just see you, this one's for you, because we see you and Kit sees you. Welcome back to Season 2 of the Retail Transformers Podcast, the #1 management and #1 indie careers podcast on the Good Pod's top weekly and monthly podcast charts, part of the #1 indie podcast network for retail. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
And I'm Casey Golden. And Ricardo, I feel like every episode lately, we've been circling the same tension. There's what the marketing and the boardroom decks say is happening in stores, and then there's what actually happens in stores.
Yeah, and those are often two very different conversations, which is exactly why I'm excited about today, because we've got someone joining us who's spent 25 years on the other side of that gap, actually running stores, actually leading the teams, and actually living the rollouts when they hit the floor.
And at so many incredible brands, from PacSun to Lucky Brand to Anthropologie, Tilly's, she's done all things and lived the experience in store, loving and leading teams, something I totally relate to.
Yeah, no, same here. It's been a little longer for me, though, since my retail store floor days. But that's part of what makes today's show so great. I think everyone can relate. Now, before I tell you more really all about her, let me tell you about our new sponsor of the Retail Razor Podcast Network, Retail Club. Join 2,000 retail leaders at the Retail Club AI Festival, September 22nd to 24th in Huntington Beach. Dive deep into how AI is reshaping retail while soaking up the sun at a fully outdoor beachside venue. Decision makers from retailers and brands can attend with free tickets and up to $1,250 in travel reimbursement. Head to retailclub.com to learn more and get your ticket today. Thank you, Retail Club, for helping us bring you this podcast and all the other shows in the Retail Razor Podcast Network. So about our incredible guest today. Her name is Kit Campoy. She's the author of the Retail Leaders Field Guide, released in 2023. And today she spends her time writing as the voice of the frontline in retail, writing about the reality of working in stores and leading store teams.
And she also helps SaaS retail tech companies speak the same language as the people running the floor, which if you've ever sat through a retail tech vendor pitch, you know this is not a small problem to solve.
No, it's not. She also covers conferences, writes industry commentary, shows up on a huge number of panels, basically anywhere the conversation benefits from having someone who's actually done the job in the room. And that's what we really want to get into today. We're going to hear a lot about what gets decided in forums and built-in product roadmaps and how it lives or dies based on what actually happens on a Saturday afternoon in a store that, let's face it, is short-staffed, running 3 rollouts at once and trying to serve a customer standing right in front of them at the same time.
And Kit has a way of talking about that reality that doesn't flinch, which is exactly the conversation we need.
So we're going to cover a lot of ground, the gap between what corporate thinks is happening versus what really is happening, the weight that store managers are actually carrying, turnover, payroll, and what retailers are at risk of getting wrong with Gen Z, again, and who she thinks is generally, set up to do this the right way.
It's going to be a good one, but first, just a quick ask for our fans listening and watching today. If you're enjoying this season, and we hope you are, I kind of feel like if you came back to listen to this episode, that means you're a regular and you're enjoying it. So why not give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods? The button might be hidden. Do a little search for it. And if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'd also love it if you would check out our other shows the Retail Razor Podcast Network offers, if you haven't already subscribed. We have got the Retail Razor Show, Blades to Greatness, and Data Blades.
Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive in. Here's our deep dive conversation with our latest retail transformer, who is so very much more than meets the eye. You didn't know I was going to say that this time, did you, Casey?
I thought we made it the whole way without it.
I was feeling inspired after last week's episode with Scott Wingo.
That's why I got to read first.
So here's our deep dive conversation with Kit Campoy. It starts now.
Welcome to the Retail Transformers podcast. Kit, it is such a nice pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you for the invite, you guys.
Yeah, this has been probably a long time coming getting you onto the show, Kit. I mean, I remember first learning about what you do and listening to, I think you were on Ron Thurston's Retail in America podcast a few years back. Mm-hmm. And then I think I remember briefly, it was probably a hot minute where I think I first met you and Steve Worley at the same time at an NRF.
Yeah.
Yep. And then since then, we always love talking about these topics where we really zero in on store teams. And you bring such a strong, powerful voice to the front line. Always love the LinkedIn post that you write. Just before we record, we're talking about one from today that I love what you said there. So we knew this was going to be such an amazing conversation to talk about frontline teams, managing stores, and maybe even more importantly, what is it that the corporate retail executives often miss and don't think about with store teams that actually, what do they mean to them, how they fuel the brand, all these things that we're going to get into today.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm here. Talk about that HQ to store disconnect.
That's right.
All day, every day.
This is definitely shaping up to be a killer conversation today, especially considering we've all worked in stores and all of us have managed store teams, actually. So let's dive in. Why don't we start actually by kicking this off by having you give us a little bit about your background and experience in retail, Kit?
For sure. Yeah. So I was kind of obsessed with fashion always. Like I was one of those kids who got every kind of fashion magazine and cut out like different styles that I liked and stuck them on poster boards and stuff like that. This was like in the 80s. And then when I went to college, I heard about a merchandising degree and I was like, what is this? It has to do with fashion. Like, I want to do that. So got a bachelor's in merchandising. And then I went to work full-time at a department store at Dillard's after I graduated as a full-time sales associate. And I did that because I just wanted to learn kind of how the business worked. Like, how does this work? You know, how does a retail floor work? How does a retail store work? And I had no intention really of making that a career, as I think a lot of us in the business would say.
Yeah.
But I just really loved it. And so the more that I learned, the more like hungry for information I was. And I just kind of wanted to learn everything. And, you know, moved to like the Buckle. That was like my first key holder position. I worked for Old Navy, PacSun, Lucky Brand, Anthropologie, and Tilly's, all in like various management roles. And yeah, I just kind of couldn't get enough of it. And then I started in 2018-ish. I started writing online and I just knew that I wanted that to be my next career. And I really just dug my heels in and spent every waking moment learning about writing online, because writing online is really different than writing for college assignments, right? Totally different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to kind of relearn how to write for a different platform. And I did that. And it's funny because I started writing on LinkedIn when I was still running stores. And I was just kind of sharing like tidbits about the day or the challenges I had. And there was always sort of this, you know, the underlining message was like, you got this, you can do this. Like, here's what happened to me today. And that just sort of like took off, that message and that content and the realities of what we were dealing with in store. And so after failing like multiple times, I kind of just kept going back to that because it was what I loved writing. It was what I loved doing. And it was also what was resonating. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I ended up here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how much you've been able to write about that store experience, what works, what doesn't work. I've been following your LinkedIn writing for some time and your book as well. And I mean, after all years that you spent leading store teams, I think one of the themes that I know always comes up is what the corporate team misses or doesn't follow or understand about what's actually going on in a store. So when you walk into a store today, I mean, what are some of the things that you see that it seems like corporate leaders are just blind to, that you say to yourself, well, how do you not see this?
I think it's the focus on tasks and not the people, not like the customers in front of you. And I've talked about this before, like the phrase welcome in has really been on the rise for a few years. And welcome in was like forbidden in my store because I just feel like that just shuts down any sort of connection. Yeah. And I think that there's 100 better ways to greet someone than welcome in. But I understand why that phrase really caught on, because it's a way for store teams to check that greeting box, but still carry on with their list of like 20 things that they have to do. So I think it's the task focus for sure, the kind of lack of connection. And I think that store managers are like always doing all the tasks right alongside people, I think, which is great, but then they don't get any time to train or develop or because they're just in it all the time. So the tasks have just really become kind of unbearable. Yeah. The ship from store and the curbside and the returns from online. I mean, stores are operating as a warehouse as well as a store, and they're getting fewer and fewer resources in order to be able to manage that. So it's super tough.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I find with that, I totally agree with you, but it seems like there's a huge interest on the retail tech side to offer and build solutions that are supposed to help with that task management, right? And that are supposed to in some way make that easier. But I'm curious what your thoughts are about, as Casey and I see this, and we've talked about this a lot in other episodes. What did the retail tech guys get wrong about how these things actually work on the store floor?
I think that I don't think that they've fully grasped like the chaos of a store floor. So they're developing these things in ideal situations, but they don't understand that maybe their new solution isn't going to talk to any other solution that's in place. That maybe store teams need a different password for 10 different tech solutions that they use. I can't tell you how many times I've walked a conference floor and talked to a tech company, and when I tell them my background, they're like, oh my gosh, so you actually know what works, and can we talk to you? We don't know.
We don't know.
The people that are developed, we don't know. We never worked retail. And it's like, okay, so their heart's in the right place, right? Like they want to make people's lives easier, but then they don't fully understand. Okay, well, that works in an ideal situation when everybody shows up to work on time and you have enough floor coverage and you have then it'll work. But that almost is never the case. So
right.
Yeah, anybody just come talk to me about customer experience when you've had to sell a $3,000 handbag to pay your rent and keep the relationship with the customer. Then we can talk.
Yes.
I'm like, that's not nice enough.
Yes. It's a totally different world.
Yeah,
totally.
When we think of, I've been on the floor, spent years on the floor. I think a lot of executives in HQ have been on the floor, but it's becoming less and less common. I think that's super sad, but I think that's its whole other podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
What's something store managers would say out loud about their company if there was zero career risk today?
I think that they might be honest that the last 3 initiatives made my job harder and made my business worse. They
Yeah.
don't feel like they can say that, right? Or maybe they would say, I stayed because I love this work. I love my team. Like we were talking about earlier, we love our store team so much because we spend so much time with them and we are there for them and we champion them and we coach them through tough times. So many store leaders are staying in it for their teams, for the people on their teams, because they actually do love the work. I mean, I get it. I love the work too, but they're burning out. They don't get full days off because they're constantly pinged for stuff all the time. They're burning out and then they can't pay their bills, right? Salaries are like plummeting. Like they're not keeping up with rising inflation, with like a million other things. And I get DMs all the time from store leaders who are just like, I don't know what to do. I can't keep doing this. I got a DM recently from someone who said that they often work 12 hours in their store alone. No breaks.
That's not even...
It's not safe. And I messaged them back and I was like, this, first of all, sounds illegal. I don't think you can work 12 hours alone and not take any breaks, right?
Yeah.
And then this person is not only managing customers, but then they're doing everything. They're processing the online orders and the shipment. And I'm like, this is bonkers. It's just not okay to treat people like that. So, and to your point, Ricardo, there's so much fear.
Yeah.
There's so much fear. They won't speak up because they're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid they're going to get fired. They're going to lose their job. There's a lot of fear right now.
Yeah. And there is that perception, right? It's such a big thing in retail of perception. So if anybody's going to remember me for something, I don't want it to be that.
Yeah.
Because retail's a really small
going
world.
To like 40 stores or 80 stores. That's not how I want you to remember me. is making, a comment or bringing something to somebody's attention, right? Because so many people like want that job at corporate. So like you don't want to be the person that's like shaking things up. Where is that gap between what leadership thinks is happening in stores and what's really going on? What's that widest gap?
I think that as executives don't visit, first of all, they don't visit stores enough. And they also don't just like pop in and like talk to people and see what's going on. Like every visit is like planned. And so stores get all this extra payroll to like clean the store and like refold everything and make it look beautiful. And then, we get executive visits and the store teams are like, yeah, everything's great. Like, look how great I'm doing. And it's like this dog and pony show that I talk about a lot, right?
Right.
And some of the best leaders that I ever had, some of the best regional managers, they would just come in like unannounced, talk to you, talk to whoever's working. That's the other thing is when we get executive visits, we strategically schedule our best people, right? Our best sales associates, the people who we know are not going to, be late or be out of dress code and all that stuff.
Everybody took 2 hours last night.
Yes. I know. And we used to tell everybody, right? Like get some sleep, make sure you're on time. But that's not reality.
Right.
So, we don't, that's not like the way we work, ever. And so, my regional manager would pop in unannounced. She would see what's going on. Even if it was a scheduled visit, she would because she didn't want you to schedule any extra hours for like her visits, right? So she would even go through your schedules. And if you had added hours, she would be like, what's this for? What are you doing? Like, why? She didn't want the facade of, oh, everything's perfect. So I think that's a big one. I think we need to like, I think the people at HQ and executives, I think they need to like visit stores, work in stores whenever possible, get in the mix to like actually see what's going on, not just the polished version of it.
Right. Yeah. The visit that's announced a week ahead and everybody goes out of their way to make everything perfect, like you said.
There were two straws that broke me in retail. That is the reason why I left. And one of those reasons was shipping $1 million worth of merchandise into a retailer for an executive to walk through, and adding 6 people to go in there and merchandise an extra $1 million worth of product on that floor for them just to walk through the room.
Yeah.
Like on their way elsewhere.
Totally staged.
Like it wasn't even to see that department. It's just you have to cross through.
Yes.
And then all that $1 million worth of product came back. And I'm like, I don't pull all-nighters to be fake.
Right.
To run a big business.
Well, and then at that point, it's just like, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
Right. What are you doing it for?
This is like
result in zero.
Yeah. What are you going to gain?
Buy. That is not the business we have at that store.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. Well, so think, I mean, just as we think more about this kind of gap between corporate and the store, sometimes it all comes down to like the decisions that get made in one part of the business that without any input from the rest almost don't make any sense. I mean, have you seen examples where there's been one of those decisions that probably made perfect sense, either in a boardroom or in a conference room back at HQ, that when it got to the store, you're just scratching your head. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. Like every month I would be like, what if it's... So one of the things I think that the people that work in home office or people that work a set schedule or like a 9 to 5 kind of forget is they would say like, oh, we have like, these huge, like Casey was just talking about like overnight floor sets or all this stuff, right? Or we want you here at 5 a.m. to do XYZ. And it's like, okay, but maybe half of my employees that are going to work on that, like they take the bus and the bus doesn't run that early in the morning. So how are they going to get here?
Yeah.
Right? Like stuff like that doesn't translate a lot. It would also be like, I also talk about this a lot, that like, I felt like every department at home office worked for a different company. I felt like they didn't, because I'm like, do you guys talk to each other?
Right.
5 different
siloed.
Departments, they're totally siloed. 5 different departments would come up with 5 different priorities that the one in and of itself is, that's fine. We can execute that this week. But then you get all 5 on the same week. And then you're like, what? Like, you want me to do all of this? And then also all the regular stuff we have to do. And then like, also, did you know that allocations is making us transfer that out? And then like, so that was a huge miss. Yeah, I'm sure it sounded great in a corporate office, but then when it hits the stores, it's like, it doesn't work.
Nothing's trying to.
Yeah. How do you get that kind of feedback back to the home office? Or how do you get anyone to understand that's where the strategy maybe can't get executed to the vision they had?
I think that you have to create a culture where feedback is appreciated and addressed and celebrated, even without a fear of retaliation. You have to have leaders that are like really willing to hear it and open to change. And it has to be like a regular part of the process. And I didn't have that for like most of my career. I didn't have that. And then finally I had a few people who kind of like stopped and listened to me, what I had to say. And then I just kicked that door wide open. And then every chance I got, I was like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
That's not working. Why did you send me this? Can I transfer that out? It's not selling. Can I get that? You know what I mean? Like, then it was just, so HQ is always, we want our store leaders to run the business like it was their own, right? Be proactive and make decisions and move things around and re-merchandise this if it isn't selling. But then a lot of times then store leaders get in trouble for that. So it's like, which one is it?
Right.
So,
right.
and that comes down to culture, and you have to work on that every day. And that's really, really tough to make great to get that right every single day takes a lot of work. And so I think that's why a lot of times people are looking for other solutions.
Yeah. That has to be hard to convey those down to your team in the store, because everyone's going to see the chaos because they're living it. So how do you you almost have to act as like that safe go-between, right? You're getting the strategy handed to you, but then you're seeing how it can't be done. And your team is looking at you like, well, how are we going to do that?
Yeah. And I always talk about like my job as a store manager was like, I'm take all the heat and like protect these guys from all the BS. And I think that's different in different positions. Like I think as a district manager, you want your store managers to feel some of that heat, right? But I mean, for a lot of my career, I was leading teams of like 60 teenagers and, 20-year-olds. So like, they don't get paid enough to deal with all that. But you really do have to be like the go-between and explain why we're doing this and how it affects the business and how it's going to make it better. Leading from like we're doing this because I said so is like the quickest way to make people just jump shit. What do they care?
I mean, a lot of them are still hearing home, right?
Yeah, they don't. Yes. Yes, they're just like, whatever then. Like, get some other job, bye. I don't got bills to pay.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Where do you see leaders confusing this activity with impact? And which metrics we're leaning on right now are distorting behavior in stores, do you feel?
Yeah. This is really tough because I think that, yes, metrics are important. Like, don't come at me being like, oh, how are we going to measure anything? How are we going to know if it's better? Like, I get it. You need the baseline. You need to measure stuff. But there's a lot of the stuff that I see that could be troublesome would be kind of like speed to service, speed metrics. How fast are you filling these orders? How fast are you ringing people up? Yes, like you have to have a sense of urgency and do things quickly, but then you're basically telling these people like, don't talk to customers because you need to be fast at this. And is that how you want your store to feel? Do you want it to feel like people are just there to be fast? Because that's not why I go shopping. Like I could order stuff and just sit here and wait for it to get delivered. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I think people are just way too focused on the fast. And I also think that I have literally seen, and I'm going to talk about conversion here, literally seen another manager yell at her family for walking in and out of the store too much because they're messing up her conversion numbers. And I think we've lost the plot there.
Yeah.
I think that I think that you should not yell at your family for walking in and out of the store, right? And that is a response to immense pressure from above. Right? And that's a horrible look. And I had to actively train my staff because yes, we track conversion. And we also had, we were in the store that I worked at, my last store. We were it was a shopping, like an outdoor, like very beautiful shopping outdoor center, right? not very big. So, and it was very close to neighborhoods. So we had a lot of families, a lot of kids, they would come after school, and guess what kids do? They run in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And they yell at each other, and then they're like, come over here. And then they run back in. Oh, now we're over here. Constantly, right? Yeah. And I had to train my staff because they would get stressed. And they would be like, oh my God, like over the walkie, oh my God, these kids are running in and out, which I tell them not to. And I'm like, no, it literally doesn't matter. Like all of these metrics are made up. And I understand why we track them. And like, yes, if you have one that is always an issue and you're not doing anything to improve it, okay, we could talk about that. But if you're in a shopping center just with tons of families that are running in and out and looking for each other and meeting up, it's whatever. I'm not going to yell at someone because they're walking in and, or if, I don't know if you guys have ever seen someone on a phone walking in and out. Just because they're on the phone, they're just pacing and they're walking in and out, right? I'm not going to yell at them and be like, hey, go stand over there. Like, and so I think that those are the kinds of the things that people, corporate, don't see. They don't see the families running in and out, the person on the floor. They don't see the manager yelling at her family to not walk in and out because it's going to mess up her metric, right? Like, obviously they wouldn't want that, but that's what happens when you get this immense pressure for your numbers to be a certain way or to look a certain way. Or I just had another memory. How many times did employees duck under the counter, right? They would duck under the counter so they wouldn't get counted, right? Like, it's so dumb. I'm like, why are we doing this? This is really what you're tracking. This is what's important.
Yeah, I remember being measured by sales per hour. And I remember the phone call on hour 2 of no sales. And just this freak out of what's going on? Why aren't there any sales? You need to send 3 people home. And I'm like, it has been an absolute madhouse all day. I need the whole staff that's here because we're actually getting stuff done right now.
Right.
Yeah.
We are all working really hard, filling the floor back up and getting everything back to where it needs to be because we got hit super hard early afternoon. And I think we're going to get super hard a little bit later too. Right. This is our chance to fill the floor, get all the stuff done, do all the things. But then it's seen as like this negative that like sales went down for 2 hours during the day and having that like micromanage from like HQ where it's just people need to eat. I got 3 people at lunch. Everybody's had water now.
Yeah.
Like sometimes other things have to happen in order for the floor to function when it's chaos. The chaos is fun when you're on the floor. You either thrive on it or you're in the back room crying and you're not made for it.
Let's find you another career.
Yeah, might want to find another career. I wouldn't suggest the restaurant industry either.
No.
But you have to trust the store manager to manage the store.
Yeah.
Where do you see, if you had to map it honestly today, because I didn't really have lists back in the day. And today with all of this tech and all of these streamlined ops and omni-channel like processes, and how many jobs does a store manager actually do in 2026?
It's a lot more than what their job title is telling you.
Yeah.
And I think they're an HR generalist, they're a recruiter, they're a trainer, they're loss prevention. They handle customer service issues, right? Before they escalate, before they go viral, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone has a camera in their pocket. They can troubleshoot tech. They're setting up the Wi-Fi. They're fixing the registers. They're like rebooting. I mean, I could fix absolutely everything in my store. I knew how it all worked. They're also complying with hopefully, federal and state labor laws, which can be very tricky. And I worked the majority of my career in California, and labor laws are very strict in California. And we employed a lot of teenagers, and so work permits, and you can't go over 4 hours if they have school. Then it's a million things to make sure you're not breaking labor laws. And I know a lot of companies just don't care. They're just like, whatever, which really sucks. And then I think what people really don't understand is you are like a counselor, a coach, a motivator for your customers and also for your staff. And you need to create a safe space so that your team can be honest with you and they can come in and be in a bad mood and be like, oh my gosh, this guy's speeding ticket, or I was gonna fight, or whatever. And you need to be able to give them the space, listen to them, hear them out. How can I help you? You want to go grab a coffee? You want to take a 10-minute break before you step on the floor? What are we working with here? And
you were
nobody.
I took them out for coffee so much because I worked with teenagers, and there's a lot of breakups. There's a lot of high school and college drama, and it's like, before the shift, let's go grab a coffee. Let's go Starbucks.
Let's get out of here. Let's go talk for 10 minutes. And I would also give them a choice. Okay, you want to work in shipment then? So you're not maybe customer facing for the first hour. Do you want to clean up the shoe room? There's a million things you can do. You don't have to stand there at the cash wrap because that's kind of a demanding position. But nobody is teaching managers those skills. No one is really teaching leaders those skills. And I was just sort of lucky because by the time I started to manage larger teams of, 60 people and up, I was already 35, right? So I sort of had the life skills already to okay, I understand. I know what it's like to be a teenager. And I know that you're going to need the day after prom off, even though you didn't request it. Right? I know that.
You know better. Yeah. You know how it works.
And so I would just look out for them and kind of tell them like, hey, this is what I'm doing, because they would always assure me, I don't need the next day off. And then I would give it to them anyways. And then they would be like, oh my gosh, I was so glad I had that day off. It's just stuff like that. And I was just lucky because I had the maturity and the life experience to know that. But I know that now retail stores are really struggling to retain talent. They're struggling to find talent. And so that piece that is invisible, because you don't see that work happening anywhere unless you're part of the team, that's the pieces that we're kind of losing. And that's why I think people are bailing out, because if you don't have a manager, if you don't have a store leader who is going to kind of sit in the muck with you for a minute and really listen to you, and they're just like, oh, you're late, and just get to your, just get to the cash wrap. If you just have someone down your throat the whole time, then why would you stay? No one's going to stay.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest challenge right now.
I mean, nobody's getting rich on the floor, right?
No. Yeah. Exactly.
There's so much passion in those four walls that can be nurtured to get so much productivity.
Yeah. And I had and just by that little piece of empathy, understanding, connection, I had teams that worked with me for 6 years, right? 6 years in one building. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
I had teenagers that would go to college and come back every break and work summers and work Christmas and tell their friends. We had a really, really solid team. And it's that kind of in between human connection that nobody is really teaching anyone how to do.
Yeah. Well, when you have so many different priorities that you're being given, all these different tasks, how do you actually tell the difference as that store manager that is the team genuinely doing the best they can? Can you tell the difference between whether there are one or more people that are underperforming that you either know can do more or could do better, or just for whatever reason aren't, and that's where you need to focus your attention? How can you distinguish these things when you've got all of these things being handed down to you?
I think, and let me make sure you're asking about underperforming.
Yeah.
Versus like being like overwhelmed.
Right.
I think a good manager can tell you right away what's in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like these are the things that are not working.
Mm-hmm.
And someone who is struggling, like super overwhelmed, will tell you nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I think they just won't communicate really.
Yeah.
And I think that underperforming teams usually have a pattern of like same issues, same people, same excuses, right? Like you're seeing the same things kind of surface over and over again.
Yeah.
And overwhelmed teams, I think, are inconsistent because like chaos is inconsistent. So like maybe one thing slips and then like another thing slips. But like underperforming teams, the same things are always wrong. There was a couple stores in our district, and every 2 or 3 months, they would need a team of people to come in and clean them up and reset them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's like those are those people are just they don't know what they're doing. They're performing. They don't get it, right?
Yeah.
When you're overwhelmed, it's, well, this thing sucks today and then that thing sucks tomorrow. And then, right? Because it's just like, we're just overwhelmed. Like, we know what we're doing.
Right?
Yeah, it's always something different. Yeah.
That's a really good insight. I feel like this is just a great conversation for our audience to just be like almost checking in with themselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I've heard this, or I haven't heard this, or gosh, I didn't even think about asking, or I haven't checked on that in a really long time, because these are all so relatable.
Exactly.
Everything is just so relatable.
Yeah.
I mean, store managers are making trade-offs every day that corporate never sees. Have you seen moments where teams start gaming the system just to survive the week?
Oh yeah, of course. I think there's so much that corporate doesn't see. I have been in the store when we have been so busy and we have been short-staffed on purpose. They knew what our volume was and they decided not to give us enough hours to help everybody. And so then managers have to decide, what customer do you let walk? And what customer do you help?
Right.
You can't help them all.
Right.
So you're like, hopefully if someone really needs something, they'll ask me. But otherwise, and I've seen so many people just walk in and then do a lap and then walk out because there's nobody to talk to them. There's nobody to help them.
Right.
We're all so
Yeah.
pumped.
Yeah.
And also on that payroll note, I think that so many store managers are approving schedules that they know, and district managers too, approving schedules they know will not work because they have to fall in line with some arbitrary budget.
Right. And they've got to hit that mark.
Like they know it's not in the best interest for the store staff, for the customer, but it's, well, like finance says we have to hit this number. So like that's
what it is.
That's what we're doing. That's what it is. And I tried to solve this problem in a number of ways in my old store. And I asked, hey, if we save, because the week after Christmas, you always get completely smashed with returns.
Right. Yep.
And that eats all your payroll dollars. Because if your payroll dollars are allotted based on your volume, returns eat into your volume, and then all your payroll is gone. But you're still busy.
February's pretty dead during the year.
Yeah. You're wildly busy, but you're not making any money, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I would ask my VP of stores even, I would ask my regional managers, hey, if I save X number of dollars in payroll these previous months, can I then use them the week after Christmas so that we can actually have people on the floor, have people to help customers, right? I've thought of, so many different ways that I could possibly work this so that it wouldn't be really a tax on them. They're not giving me anything extra. I'm just moving the money around.
Right.
And I was always told, no, you can't do that. That's not the way it works. I was like, then change it. What do you mean? That's not the way it works. Like, just fix it.
If you know it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's like one of those, if you keep doing the same behavior over and over again, you can't expect a different result.
Like, all right, that's weird, but okay.
Yeah.
So I was always told no. Yeah, I was always told no. And so then what I would do the week after Christmas is blow my payroll. And I would do it on purpose, right? I would be like, I don't care. Just like 30 hours, 40 hours. I don't care. I literally don't care. I'm not going, like, how many hours have I saved all year? I know because I'm keeping track, right?
Yeah.
I'm paying attention to this. I know how much I've saved all year. You're not going to give me any extra. So I'm just going to spend it because I'm not going to make bonus anyways. So, and I've had conversations with my leadership team. Do you want your $100 bonus or do you want payroll? And they were all be like, I don't care. Just staff the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just staff the floor. And I don't want everybody to quit. I don't want anybody.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so many, and I'm not alone in that. So many retail leaders that I talk to were like, yeah, I blow my payroll all the time. Because I have no choice. I have to.
Right.
So it's just like these systems are put in place and it's just we're told, oh, we can't because that's the way it is. But if also you made this up and you have the power to change it, but you won't. So,
right. Right. Yeah. And so many of these things. Yeah. And so much as like if you don't do or you don't compensate for these things, you end up with a really frustrated team. Right. And eventually that just leads to people leaving. And it always makes the news, right, about how turnover is so high in retail. I know I just recently saw Ron Thurston even talking about how like the number is up to 80% now, which just if you think about it, I mean, to me, that's a mind blowing number, right? That's the turnover. But what does that actually feel like when you're running the store day to day to see the turnover happening to you?
First of all, 80% is wild.
Yeah.
I can't believe that it's that high. I mean, I can, but it's still wild
it's hard
to see
believe
that number.
Yeah. I mean, I see that not only is like employee turnover, but like those are your customers and your brand advocates that are leaving your brand, you're leaving a bad taste in their mouth about the brand from like direct experience too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it means, so what that feels like when you're running a store and you have that much turnover is that you can basically never get ahead. You can never really do the job that you were hired to do, which is like run the business as a whole, because you're constantly hiring, you're constantly training, you're constantly like rotating through a different cast of people. So it never really feels like a team because people are constantly like,
you're always
got
getting
one
new people.
foot out the door and then coming in. And then like to Casey's point, you lose those brand ambassadors. You lose all those people who have like really intricate knowledge of the stockroom, or they have a really good relationship with like your shipment driver or your FedEx person. They know where everything is. They know like what actually works when you have a rush of customers. They know like what people to put where. When you just have new people all the time, nothing feels grounded. Everything feels kind of fleeting. And like from your customer's point of view, I mean, like I said, I had people who stayed in my store a long time. So when one person would leave, they had regular people. And so customers would come back and be like, where's so-and-so? They used to help me with shoes, or they help my son all the time. And your customers start to build relationships
Right.
with these people, and then they're just gone. And then it's like you're making your customer kind of start all
Making
over
them start over too.
Yeah.
Store pay used to cover life. I mean, you're not super bougie, but like I paid my rent, I paid my car payment, I paid my car insurance. I lived alone. I paid gas. I paid for food, like all the things. Now a full-time store role barely, does it even cover rent these days?
It's really tough. Yeah, it's really tough.
Compensation, I just can't imagine the compensation is kept up with the cost of living. What are companies saying about this role? I mean, there's more to do than maybe there was 20 years ago. You have to be tech savvy. A lot of these people have bachelor's degrees. There's no way you're paying your student loans if you work in retail right now. I'm sorry. I could not imagine. How does that really land with the people in it? I mean, you want to secure this talent. Somebody's running a $30 million store, $10 million store. That is valuable, in my opinion. I mean, they're running that store. They should be able to live and not get a second job and not be always have one foot out. But payroll hours are definitely a thing. We've got super high turnover. What does it really look like these days? Like, how can you secure that talent, or can it still be a job?
I think bottom line, I think companies have got to pay their store leaders more. You have to. And I don't know what you need to do to make that happen, but you have to, because when you don't, you're telling them without saying that your role is unskilled, right? You're telling them this position is temporary. You're telling them they're replaceable. And the people in those roles, that's the way it lands, not because someone said it out loud, because the math doesn't lie, right? I can't. You're telling me that I have to run this multi-million-dollar store. You're giving me $60K a year. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay for gas? How am I going to buy lunch every day?
Right.
You're telling them that this job is temporary, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge part of the problem, because people will leave for $1 more an hour. Right?
Right.
They'll leave for $2 more an hour. The cost to replace, not necessarily in a leadership position, just a sales associate, right? The cost to replace someone is $10,000.
Yeah.
So you're letting people, I'm just like, what math are you guys looking at?
Right.
Because you're not going to give people raises to keep up with what they need to live. Not even live, but like nobody can do anything. Like nobody can take a vacation. It's too expensive. They don't make enough money. Nobody can. Have you seen the price of concerts? What happened? I don't know.
What happened? Yeah.
What? Like concerts are like hundreds of dollars now. Like no, like
I'm doing see Madonna and I pull it up and like $3,500.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that's why there was a big court case on that recently.
Yes, 100%. I don't Ticketmaster. Pearl Jam tried it back in the 90s, but Ticketmaster's still in trouble.
Yep.
But it's like you can't. Then what? So then you're just. That's all you do is work. Like that's not anyway. Nobody wants that.
Right.
But yeah, it's just like I was running $5 million store. Super dynamic. Like we carried I don't even know how many brands. We carried countless number of brands, countless number of vendors that I had to maintain relationships with. I was also very close to corporate, so I get VP visits, I get vendor visits all the time. This was a while ago, but I was making $60,000 a year, right? And my raises, what's 3%? Oh, you're getting 3%. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Right. Fabulous.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Super. I'll go buy a movie ticket with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And after a career of that, it's just, and you're putting people in the position to where they have to quit and go work for another company to get a substantial raise. And
Right.
you're making people play this game when you could just pay them more. And then you would get people who are invested, who are dedicated, who want to grow. But instead, there's been this atmosphere created that if you want to get a substantial pay raise, you have to hop companies. And so that's what people are doing. And I don't blame them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that
Makes
seems
sense.
to be how everybody gets a pay raise is to leave the company.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's always
or threaten,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Or threaten. And then they're like, oh, wait, we're going to give you a raise. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that doesn't feel good either.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like, oh, so you could have paid me this much more and you didn't.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't find that I haven't met, I mean, granted, I haven't met as many store managers as Mr. Ron Thurston or yourself, I'm sure. But it is something where I don't think I've ever met one that hated their job. Like, they liked it. They were very passionate about it. They did the best that they could, but they left because they had to. Because it wasn't good for them. It didn't make sense in the brain. It made sense in the heart.
Yeah.
And they stayed 2 years longer than they should. I think this is why we get so many accidental careers in retail. Everybody loved the job and they loved the environment and they loved building that and the culture and having the people in that store experience. It is very addicting, I feel. If you're made for it, you're made for it. But so many people that I've spoken to that are no longer store managers, it was like a moment where they had to just shut that part down and be like, have to use your head and do something that's logical because this doesn't serve you and this will never serve you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's exactly why I left too. And I because I didn't want to be a district manager.
Right.
I was like,
But
that's the same
they need to keep, right? It's just the people that love it. The people that are great at it.
Yeah.
I loved it and I was really great at it, but I didn't really want to be a district manager because I didn't see career path.
Yeah.
Right. It was like priorities kept shifting and it was like, well, we're going to just keep, it was just basically more work for the same amount of pay. We'll just keep giving you stretch assignments. We'll just keep having you train into everybody. We'll just, you know, so it was that. I was also really bored. And it's kind of a wild feeling to be so busy that you can't catch your breath and also bored.
Yeah.
That's weird. And then
all at the same time.
All at the same time. And then I was looking 5-10 years in the future. Retail is physically so taxing. And I just was like, I don't know if I want to be doing this physically over the next 10 years. Like, do I want to have to stand for 12, 14 hours a day and be like 6 miles a day around my sales floor? And like,
my Apple Watch would have been so happy if
yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's always check.
It's like, you need to stand up.
Right.
Yeah. We would always check towards the end of my career, you know, we all had Apple Watches and we were like, well, how many steps do you have today? You know, because you're climbing ladders and you're on the floor and it's dirty and it's just, okay, I don't know how, if I want to do this until I'm 60, I don't think I want to do that. But, and then, you know, I wound up doing this other career, which is kind of a wild turn. But when I left, I cried for 2 weeks. I was so sad to leave all the people, all the people on the team, like customers. I loved it so much. I loved walking the shipment racks in the morning and I loved pulling out stuff that I knew was going to sell, right? Like, this is going to sell, that's going to sell. Put it in the front, put it here, put this on the mannequin. And then that's the other thing, to Casey's point, you're in it and you love it. immediately, right? Or it's not for you. And I loved it because of the pace. The pace is so addicting, and the feedback, you get feedback in real time, which you don't get in a lot of other jobs. And
that's true.
It was just so much fun. Yeah, I loved it a lot. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but yeah.
Well, I do like, before we get to a close, I do want to ask you one sort of different direction here. Let's talk about Gen Z for a minute, because, we hear a lot about Gen Z and retail from that customer point of view, but I feel like sometimes we forget that there's a lot of Gen Z that are taking jobs in retail. And at the same time as they're being a heavy targeted customer in retail. Yeah. So in your view, having lived through all this, right, what are retailers at risk of getting wrong with this demographic? And if store managers actually had an influence over this, what kinds of things would store managers be telling the brand?
I think that Gen Z is really unique, and I think that we need to not just keep treating them like another generation. Like we did with every generation
everyone before
prior. Them. Yeah. I was running stores when Gen Z first entered the workforce, and they were coming to work with me at 16, 17 years old. And I immediately loved them because they're like no BS. They totally get it. Like if I was breaking the rules for some reason, like, spending extra payroll or whatever, and I told them like we're not supposed to be doing this, but I'm just gonna add a bunch of payroll. So if you want another shift, let me know. They were just like, yeah, okay. They're no, yeah, we get it. We get you're breaking the rules, but it's gonna benefit us, and we're here for that. They were just like, okay, yeah, let's go. So I think that as shoppers, I think inauthenticity is they can sense that from a mile away.
Yeah.
They know if you're fake. They know if you're just trying to do it to impress them, and they're not about that at all. So I think that brands need to really think about who they are and what makes them unique and lean into that, rather than trying to be kind of oh, I'm going to do this to try to appeal to Gen Z, because they're going to know.
Yeah. Yep.
They're going to know. Yeah.
It's been such an enjoyable conversation. And I think it's just a great reminder for everyone out there. We're all going back to the stores. We're all shopping in the stores right now. The summer weather's coming out. I feel the vibe here in New York. So be nice to everybody in the store.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes, please. Yes.
That's right.
They're dealing with a lot.
Share those kudos. And I think it's a great time for everyone that's at HQ to see if they can do one thing each quarter to support store managers and staff better going forward. We need retail to be a career. We need all of these people that are choosing to come and work at your brand because they love it. Nobody's walking into a store they hate to say, nutrition.
Yeah, that's right.
These are your customers as well, or your aspirational customers as well. This is still your market, regardless of whether or not they're on payroll or if they're bringing in the revenue also. So it's just always so energizing to kind of have a nice little reality check and have a good retail conversation. Kit, you've done just that. So thank you. So I hope everybody feels a little bit inspired and or just a little reminiscent. Their time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you come back and get there's so much more we can talk about, but it's so refreshing to kind of take a minute to talk about what I think really is, Casey just said, everyone's going back to stores. So it's one of the things that it feels like people forget to talk about, and those are the store teams that are actually making that environment be what it is in front of every single customer the brand has. It's easy for people at the home office to kind of sit behind the brand as if there's sort of this plastic shield that's protecting you separating you from the customers. But no, there really is a team of human beings that are there doing the hard work for you in front of customers and making things happen. And they're constantly faced with challenges that you don't even hear about. sometimes. So it's one of those things where thank you, Kit, for actually telling those stories and surfacing them so everybody really does know what it's like in the day in the life of a store kind of thing. Thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I just hope to get the word out, and I just really hope that more executives just go talk to a store manager and don't bring an agenda, and just go listen to them and see what's going on so you can get the real story.
Yeah.
Kit, if anyone is listening or watching today and they want to reach out to you and learn more about what you're doing, or maybe some of the retail tech leaders out there today want to inquire about your writing, how should they contact you? How do they get in touch?
The best way, the easiest way is probably LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me, Kit Campoy, and you can just send me a DM, or you can check out my website, which is kitcampoy.com.
Super. Well, Ricardo, this episode is a wrap. So you loved this episode, didn't you? Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods. And if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe before you go. I'm Casey Golden.
Follow us on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram, and subscribe to our Substack for highlights and bonus content. For transcripts and guest info, visit retailrazor.com. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
Thanks for joining us on the Retail Transformers podcast, part of the Retail Razor Podcast Network.
Until next time, stay sharp, be bold, and keep transforming retail. This is the Retail Razor Retail Transformers.